you've started a podcast or you've had one for a while and you're interviewing people and you're starting to wonder now that you're comfortable doing the podcasting stuff, that if your interview techniques are good or bad. Well, I got Gord Vickman back from Strategic Coach to discuss this about nitty-gritty interview techniques. As you recall, Gord is the podcast manager at Strategic Coach. He's also the host of Podcast Payoffs with Dan Sullivan. Also, 10 years of morning radio hosting experience in a major market. So, Gord, thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure, Andre.
So
Happy to be here.
today, sorry. Nitty-gritty of interview techniques. What did you mean by that?
Well, what I meant by that is one thing that I would love to see more of is the one question prep sheet. So what do I mean by the one question prep sheet? Andre, the single most important skill when it comes to interviewing is not talking or what you're going to say. It's actually listening. So I'll give you a story about what I'm talking about. This was a long time ago. Up here in Canada, we had a station, not around anymore, called Much Music. Okay, this was Canada's version of MTV. So there was a band. They're called the Bare Naked Ladies. They got a cheeky name. Many of you may have heard of them. They have since sort of moderately disbanded because the lead singer, Stephen Page, left to do his solo thing. This is not recent. He left a long time ago, but the rest of the members carried on. They were all together in a band, and they were being interviewed by a young woman. She was lovely. No beef with her whatsoever, but you could tell that she was somewhat inexperienced in terms of the interview. So she was sitting there, and they were talking about band stuff and talking about touring stuff and talking about this. And they were talking about one specific incident. So one of the members of the Bare Naked Ladies said, yeah, this happened, that happened. And then there was the explosion. And all the members said, oh yeah, the explosion. Right. The young woman interviewing them moved on to the next question because she had the rattling paper in her hand. And she said something like, well, how long did the record take? I'm screaming at the television saying, hold on a second. They just said the explosion. What blew up? And I'm sure there were thousands of young people watching Much Music at the time wondering what blew up. We never found out what blew up because we didn't have the internet back then to discover. We didn't have Perplexity to ask AI what blew up. And that stuck with me because I had not even started radio. I mean, this was like 22 years ago, and this story still sticks with me because of all the interviews that I've done with celebrities, athletes, politicians, community leaders. There's been thousands of them throughout the years. Was I have to always remember to listen to what the person is saying because they said to her, something blew up, and she didn't even follow up on it. And again, that's just a factor of inexperience. And that was one thing that, like I said, it always stuck with me was listening to what the person said. What does this have to do with the one question prep sheet? If you've been doing this for a while and you feel confident and you're prepping an interview, start with one question, and the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth questions will be born of the answer that your interview subject gives. Mm-hmm. And that's what it means to have like a free-flowing, free-form conversation that sounds not scripted, is just having the next thing you ask be based on something that person said. It's tricky. It takes a bit of practice. And you can always have like a life raft at the bottom where you can have 2-3 questions that ideally you're not necessarily going to get to unless something goes completely off the rails. But everything should come from the first answer that your interview subject gave to you. And then it just kind of rolls from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And in my case, I got 3 discussion points, but that just allows freedom to go. I think I never realized I always want the first one to start, and then where it goes. Like the last discussion we had, we only had the one topic covered.
One question. Yeah.
One question. And then the other 2 are backups just in case.
There you go. So you filled out my one question prep sheet, and you had never even heard about it until I just brought it up. So you kind of nailed it. But you've been interviewing for a while. I mean, you've done lots of interviews. So
yeah, over 300 now.
Yeah, you have an instinct for this, and you've built up your chops, and you sort of understand it. But I get asked sometimes too. I had a conversation with a client who has a podcast just last week, and she said, what if an interview is going sideways? What if someone is just really dull? What if they're not giving you anything? You're trying to pull it out of them.
Pull water from a rock type of deal?
Type of, yeah, exactly. There's one line that I love and I've always loved, and it's really simple. Tell me more about that.
Tell me more about that.
Yep. You can say it about anything, to anything, about anyone or anything. If you're interviewing someone and they're just not that, I mean, the person might be painfully dull, and in which case you might second guess whether you're going to publish that episode or not, because you're not going to publish something that is not reflective of, the standards that you've set
Mm-hmm.
for your show. But if someone is just a little bit timid, tell me more about that is a great line that you can use. I call it like a can opener line, right? You throw that out there, and ideally the person will take it because you're giving them an opportunity to tell you more about something that obviously they feel strongly enough about or they know enough about to
Right.
appear on a podcast in the first place. Tell me more about that.
So
I think it's a great
if they're
line.
just giving you one word answers or very short answers, you can have them elaborate with that simple question. Tell me more about that.
Tell me more about that.
Well, tell me more about that, Gordon.
Love to tell you more about that. So, uh, another nitty gritty here. So, I'll tell you more about that. Someone is being a grade A jerk. Yeah, just shut the interview down because it's not going to really go anywhere. If someone, another sort of technique you can use to pull things out, if someone is sort of holding back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard this is not original, but I heard someone interviewing someone one time, and it was a woman interviewing someone who'd been through a very traumatic experience, and they were trying to pull out, as much as the person wanted to offer, but she had a really great way of doing it. She said, after not really getting anything for a very long time, she said, a lot of people find that it's really difficult to express themselves in situations like this. Why do you think that is? Why is it so hard that when we're given an opportunity that we thought we wanted, which was to use our voice and to share what we've been through, why is it so hard for most of us to do that? And here we go. That was like a wonderful tell me more about that moment because the individual just completely opened up because it wasn't about the incident or the thing
Yeah.
anymore. It was, why is it so hard to say what we want to say when we're given an opportunity? We can all rehearse in the shower, we can talk to ourselves when we're walking down the street, but when you're on stage, so to speak, or when you have the opportunity that you thought you were waiting for all along and you kind of clam up, when she said, why is it so hard for so many of us, not you,
Right. I was going to say,
this is
not
one
you in
instance.
this
Yeah.
case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is one instance. We spoke previously about why the word you is so important because 98% of podcast listening is done alone. So this would be one instance where you really don't want to use the you. You want to give like a warm fuzzy hug, right? You
Mhm.
want to, instead of saying, why is it so hard for you to open up? Now you're attacking that person. So to bring the whole thing around, you would say, well, why is it so hard for so many of us when given the opportunity to express what we want to say? Why is it so difficult for so many of us? Why do you think that is? And then see where that goes. And then you can go back to tell me more about that. As if you get one little nugget, tell me more about that. Well, I was really shy as a child and I got shut down by all my teachers and I was told, tell me more about that.
Mhm.
Was there one specific, was there a day that sticks out in your mind? Yeah, it was fourth grade and Miss Henderson, smacked me with the ruler and told me to shut up. And then ever since that day, and then now you got, everyone's crying and you got the emotion going on and you have yourself a great interview.
Yeah.
So those are some techniques that you can use if things are going sideways and south to pull it back and see if you can salvage things. As long as the person's not being a grade A jerk, because that's totally different. You just shut down the interview. If someone's being actively rude to you, don't interview them. There's
Yeah.
plenty of nice.
And in my case, I had one that was actively rude to my audience. So like you said, I shut down the interview, not saying we're done, let's get out of here. I finished the interview, but quicker. And I just never published it because it would be
Yeah,
damaging to my audience, I thought.
sure.
So um any other tidbits for improving your interviewing skills or techniques? Like the listening part is the huge one.
Hmm.
Like, and to go off of that, like I say, like some people say, well, where's the scripts? I don't do scripts myself. I go where the conversation is, but it's a lot has to do is based on what who I'm interviewing says.
Yep.
Sometimes where they're one statement can say, oh no, I want to go after that rabbit now
Yeah.
and talk about that. But I'm using my list of questions or just I call them discussion points as those are my barriers, my guardrails to not me go off track. But if it goes along the conversation, or like I have an episode purpose outlined for the guest and myself, so I know where to stay in that tangent or to
Hmm.
reduce the tangents really helps. So the listening part, I think now that you're saying that, probably the best interviews I know listen the most and go off of what was said. So that's a great insight.
Hmm.
What missteps can we do in an interview? Like, how can I destroy an interview with a guest?
One of the things that I hear a little bit, thankfully not too much, is I know that there are media personalities and big podcasters out there that I really enjoy listening to when they're being interviewed, but when they flip it around and they start their own show and they do the interviewing, they're just not that good because they're so used to being the subject that they don't know how to let the other
Mm,
person shine. Maybe that has a lot to do with ego. Maybe that has a lot to do with them thinking they're smarter than the other person. But there are people that are really good at being interviewed, but they're just not very good at doing the interviewing themselves. So don't make it all about you. You know, it's the old like, well, enough about me. How do you feel about me? You know what
right.
I mean? Like there's the so-called experts who have been interviewed so many times and then they want to launch their own show, but they just don't know how to do it. So keep in mind that when you're interviewing someone, it's not necessarily about waiting for them to stop talking so you can interject with stories of your own. Otherwise, you might as well just do a solo podcast and not even have the other person there. So keeping in mind that, yeah, it has to be a discussion, but avoid the temptation, however delicious it might be, to pull it all back and make it about you based on what the person has said, is going to go a long way because I find people kind of pick up on that. Have
Yeah. Yeah.
you notice that people pick up on that? There's one person I'm thinking in particular, I won't say his name, but he spent years being interviewed on podcasts and started one of his own, became wildly successful, but I just can't listen to it because it's always about him. It's always about him and it's never about the other person. And to me, it just kind of grates me a little bit. So, but good for him. He's made millions of dollars. So who the hell am I? But for some reason, it's like, yeah.
So, okay, now you're saying that we'll make it about the guest, but how at the same time can we make it about the listener as well? Because I think there's another dynamic in there. It's not just me and you talking here. I still have to make it interesting or entertaining to my guest or
Hmm.
to my listener. Sorry. How can that, is that still talking about the guest, or is there something else that we can do or that we're doing incorrectly?
I think the parameters and the expectations are set. I think people know when they listen to a podcast that the role that they play is to be a fly on the wall of interesting people having interesting conversations. So you've fulfilled your end of the bargain when you're having an interesting conversation with another interesting person and you're making it free flowing and it's not scripted and you're asking questions which will elicit the kind of answers that people want to listen to. You're asking the kinds of questions that will encourage people to tell stories that they might not have told before, or at least not in a long time. You're encouraging them to open up. You're exposing them, so to speak. And I don't mean literally, but I mean figuratively. You're not telling someone to like, hey, yank your pants down here. But you are kind of doing that intellectually when you are asking those kinds of questions that are going to give the listener a view or some kind of information that they weren't expecting or something that they may not be prepared to hear
Mhm.
because they already know what their role is in this. They're going to be a fly on the wall and they're going to be privy to hearing an interesting conversation between two people. So they know that they're not going to be able to jump in. This is not like Clubhouse. Like what was that goofy app that everybody was on for 10 seconds where you can listen
Oh,
to,
yeah.
remember Clubhouse?
Yeah.
It was
Mickey
like,
Mouse is
oh,
a clubhouse.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
like, well, it was that app, and it was like two people are talking, and then you can put your hand up and you can join. They thought this was the future. But then what it turned into was the things that were coming from the people in those clubhouse rooms it was so stupid that people stopped asking people to ask things because it was derailing entire conversations. And then it became like a college lecture where you just have two people talking at people. Anyway, I don't even know who uses it anymore. Apparently, it's like a social media now. I don't
Oh,
know.
that clubhouse. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah, see,
remember.
I know what I was talking about,
Yeah.
but because it was like it was such a flash in the pan. It was supposed to be the future of podcasting. It's like you got to get on Clubhouse because your listeners want to talk to you, and then it turns out that most of them are, you know, weirdos, or they have nothing all that interesting to add, or they have an axe to grind, or they just don't,
Yeah.
it's not part of the thing, you know what I mean? So let's stick with the original script here and say that most people who listen to podcasts know what the deal is. They're going to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. They don't want to interject necessarily. If they really want to talk to you, like you give your email at the end of every episode of your podcast. If people do want to interact with you, which is wonderful, they can do so. They just can't do it in real time. Like they can't jump on with us right now and share their opinions, but they can share their opinion after the fact. If they think I said something stupid, yeah, tell me all about it. I'm not closed-minded in that way. So, you know, have at it.
Yeah, that's a good point, that the audience already knows what the role is.
Hmm.
Yeah, I guess, because I always say, as long as I'm learning, everyone's learning, I'm letting them eavesdrop on the conversation. It's a phrase I've been using lately. So it makes a
That's
lot of
exactly
sense.
what it is. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. Why does anyone listen to radio? Well, they used to, but why do people listen to podcasts? Because, you know, they're going to learn something and they're going to hear two people or three people or however many are on there speaking about something that is interesting to them. And they know that, like I said, they know that they're not going to be part of it, but they're willing to suspend that for as long as they feel they want to continue listening to it, as long as, again, we're being entertaining and we're being educational and
Hmm.
we're providing things to them that they maybe didn't know before, or at least provide it in some kind of different context than they've ever heard before, giving them something original, something that they didn't have before they started listening.
So the first interview you've ever done, how good were you?
I was terrible. I was terrible. I think
And
we
then
were
your second
interviewing
one,
probably terrible. And
but
then my
better.
third and fourth, maybe terrible still. And then I still, like, I'm not Larry King. I'm not the greatest interviewer in the world, but I have enough reps to sort of know and have a foundation of what I'm doing. And you asked me, a few minutes ago, it's like, how do you get better at this? That's all it comes down to, is just reps. Reps, self-reflection, studying and listening to people. Find people that are doing it really, really well and listen to the way that they do it. Listen to the way they structure questions, listen to the way they bring people into things, listen to the things that they're doing, and then try and emulate that. And then you keep faking it until it becomes natural. But podcasts are interesting, Andre, and
Hmm.
I'll tell you why. Well, they're interesting for a million reasons, but people get really down on themselves when they're not amazing at this the very first time they do it. Well, tell me anything in the world that you can do for the very first time and be amazing, unless you're some kind of virtuoso or you have like those people that get hit in the head and wake up and they can speak German all of a sudden, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Unless
Yeah.
there's one of those weird, like, time life unsolved mysteries things that happen. It's not something that you're going to be good at right away. You're not going to stand on a skateboard and start doing like 380 kickflip ollies off a ramp. Like, it takes years to do that. But because everybody can talk and because everybody can afford a microphone, everybody assumes that they're going to be really amazing at this because we already have the gear to do it. It's just like anything. I don't think that I'm going to be able to run a bead of caulking around my bathtub as good as a plumber who's been doing it for 35 years. And it's almost arrogant for me to think that I'm going to be able to do that. I'm not going to be able to sing like someone who's been singing in an opera for 40 years, their entire life. So it's arrogant for me to assume that just because I can sing that I'm going to be able to do that. Broadcasting is the same, and that's what we're doing here. Podcasting is broadcasting. There are people who've been doing this for 25 years. There are people who've been doing it for 10 years. They're going to have things that you, as a brand new podcaster, don't, because they've put in the reps and they put in the time. They've ideally studied from those that do it better than they do. They've emulated those that are doing it in a way that they would like to become one day. And they've put in the time. So if you're not amazing at this right off the hop, that's okay, because you're not supposed to be amazing at something that you've been doing for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Give yourself a break. It's okay. Your first show is your worst show. It rhymes and it's true.
Well, that's what I wanted to bring out, that it takes reps. Your first one's going to be the worst. And I'm not too sure if you're the one that told me this, but someone, pretty sure it was you. I was not going to find my voice and my style until about episode 30.
Hmm.
And about there, I found a consistency, because my first 30 was trial and error a lot and finding out what was good and not, what went well and what didn't go well.
Hmm.
And then trying not to fit in with the crowd. That was the biggest one.
Yeah.
right? Everyone's doing this. I should do that. Oh, no, that doesn't feel right. Don't do it.
Yeah. I'll use a weird I'll use a weird comparison. Scuba diving. Okay, I've been scuba diving for 27 years, and I do it a lot. If you like it, wonderful. So do I. I find that scuba diving doesn't get fun until you've done it about 15 to 20 times. Because the
Correct.
first 15 times you're underwater, you're so busy screwing around with your gauges. Like, do I have enough air? Where's my partner? I'm okay. You okay? Everybody's
Balloon
okay.
up,
Do I have
balloon
enough air?
down, up and
Yeah,
down, up and down.
like all of a sudden I'm at the surface. I thought I
Yeah.
was, like 10 meters underwater. Oh shit, like my vest is full of air. I gotta go like this. So you spend all your time underwater screwing around with your gear, making sure you're not going to die, and that's pretty normal. But that's the first 10 to 15 dives,
Yeah.
and then you do it like 20 times, and then you find you're like, I'm having a lot more fun down here. I'm seeing a lot more things.
Relaxing.
Yeah, like I'm relaxing. I didn't see very much the first 15 times. I didn't see any turtles. Everyone's at the boat. They're like,
Yeah.
you see the turtle? It's like, no, I was staring at my air gauge. Sorry. So then you do it like 25 times and you go 30 times and then 40 times and then 50 times. And then like by the 50th one or 60th time you go underwater, it's easy breezy because everything is natural now and you feel comfortable under there. That's the progression of the activity. And you really don't enjoy yourself. You're mostly in a panic the first 10 times you go down to make sure that you stay alive. But when you've done it 50, 60, 75, 100 times, that's when it starts getting a lot of fun. It gets a lot more fun because you can actually relax and you don't have to worry about everything so much. So
And you're
I
finding
chose,
a routine and you're comfortable with the equipment and or with the flow of the interview. And then that
yeah,
gives you more mental capacity. And once you got a lot of stuff on robot mode to be
yeah,
able to listen more. So
yeah. Or
it's definitely a muscle to build up with
something goes
time.
wrong. You've been through it 12 times already, so you're just like, okay, fix that.
Yeah.
So what does scuba diving have to do with podcasting? Well, it has to do
Okay.
with everything that you're learning. Any skill that takes,
Mastering.
mastering, practice, patience, and reps. There's no literal connection between podcasting and scuba diving, but I brought it up just because you're probably not going to like the first 10 times that you go and do an interview with someone, just like you're not going to have very much fun the first 10 times you go underwater. But if you keep at it and you keep doing it, something kind of happens. And I may have said 30 episodes. For you, it may happen earlier. It may take 50 episodes. Some people might find that groove in the
Mhm.
in the 15th. Maybe for some they never find it. But I don't think so. I think you will eventually. But if it's something you enjoy and it's something that you think is fun and you're not doing it because everyone told you to, but if it's something you legitimately enjoy doing, you are going to find that groove and things will start to feel easier. Interviewing will feel easier. Recovering from strange occurrences in interviews will feel easier. Coming up with questions based on answers will feel easier. Everything will start to come together very much like the scuba diving thing that we were
Yeah.
talking about. You're going to feel very comfortable underwater after a period of time when you found that groove, and things will start. And that's when it gets fun. That's when
Yeah.
things get a lot of fun.
And I agree with that. So I think that's a great takeaway for this episode is it takes time and reps to improve your interview skills to be more masterful and more comfortable. I think comfort is a really big and key one because if you're more comfortable and less worried about the equipment or whatnot, and I really like that analogy of scuba. That's a great one. The one question prep sheet from there, the conversation should dictate the flow. And if you're listening properly to the guest, the questions should come to you quite easily that are not scripted. And I think this is a very great piece of advice from Gord is listen to how other good interviewers that you respect ask questions, how they formulate them and at what time. And if you start looking at it that way, you can start that also show you how they're listening and how you can listen, how your listening can improve. So Gord, thanks again. I appreciate this tremendously.
My pleasure, Andre. A lot of
And
fun today.
yeah, it was. And to you, the listeners, thanks again for learning with me. We'll talk to you soon.